Hey everybody, it must be Monday. I must be Spike Cohen, and you must be whoever you are, because this is Culture of Winning, and I am Spike Cohen, making this Spike Cohen's Culture of Winning. I really need to work on the intro there. This is Monday, the 25th of January, our 16th episode, and I'm glad that you came to join us. Now, for those who don't know what Culture of Winning is a show where we talk to libertarians who have won their races and are now in positions of government to show that libertarians do win races all the time, to show how they're winning their races, and to build a blueprint for how libertarians can win across the country. Now, this episode's a little bit different because our guest actually didn't win his elected race. And I know what you're thinking, Spike, you disgusting liar. But keep with me, because it's actually, he's still in a position because he won being appointed afterwards as a result of his win. Or of his run that he had previously. And we're going to talk more about that, because even if you don't win your race, there's a good chance that you may still be able to end up being appointed to something else and be able to make positive changes as a libertarian as a result. So without further ado, I'm going to let him tell his own story. He is the newly appointed Pinckney, Village of Pinckney, Michigan Planning Commissioner. His name is Joe Hartman. Joe, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Spike.
Did I say that correctly?
Oh, you got it. That's my new government position.
Awesome,
yes.
Awesome, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Fair warning, Joe's cat, Eddie, named after Edward Snowden, may come and mess everything up at any moment. So if that happens, we are not sorry, because cats are the ultimate libertarians. So, Joe, this is your first time on any of my shows. We've never actually had a chance to talk. So anytime I have a libertarian on any of my shows for the first time, I ask them what it is that got them into being a libertarian and into the Libertarian Party. Was it an aha moment or sort of a gradual evolution over time? All libertarians have their, I guess, genesis story. Tell us the Joe Hartman story.
Yeah, so like so many of our fellow libertarian millennials, Ron Paul was the beginning for me. In 2008, being a young college student, Dr. Paul was talking about how marijuana should be legal and wars should be over. And it just made sense. And right. I came from somewhat of a Republican-ish, I wasn't super interested in politics, but I definitely had a positive connotation of markets and capitalism. And so the idea of, voluntary exchange, and then the way that Dr. Paul explained, his consistent ideology built upon, peace and markets and voluntarism and libertarianism,
right.
just stuck with me. It just made so much sense. And so I hadn't been too interested in the Libertarian Party. I mean, I generally like the idea of it for many years. I guess that was a lot of years just kind of disinterested, anti-political to some degree, just not really seeing the political sphere as something that's fixable. It's not it's not worth the time of trying to make political arguments in that sort of way. So a big part of my motivation to get more involved with the Libertarian Party was the growth of the Mises Caucus. And over the years of being a libertarian, I got more and more intrigued and interested and really obsessed with the philosophy of Mises and Rothbard. And my favorite word is praxeology. I just think that's the underlying basis, the best way to describe the libertarian principles. And so the growth of the Mises Caucus and wanting to get involved and having the opportunity to run for Congress was intriguing to me. And so, like I mentioned, a big part of my motivation for 2020 was the fact that you were the vice president on the ticket, and you had such a just principled and hardcore approach to really pointing out libertarian principles across the board and the anarcho-capitalist ideas that you speak about so well. So it was just I wanted to be a part of the Libertarian Party in a bigger way, and the free platform of running for Congress seemed like a good opportunity and adventure. So yeah.
Here's what I heard from that, Joe. It was me.
Yes, it's all you,
I
Spike.
did this. Well, me and Ron Paul.
And Ron Paul. Yeah, yeah.
And the Mises Caucus. But it was me. Could we say it was mostly me or a good bit me?
Well, I would say
you don't have to say it was mostly me.
In a huge way, in a very real way, the improvement of you over Bill Weld, to me, in terms of wanting to be a part of an organization, that was an upgrade that was very appealing. That was a huge, dynamic in the appeal of the Libertarian Party to me. So, yeah,
we definitely saw. As I say often, it was not a being better than the previous VP candidate is not a high hurdle to jump, but I jumped it with great gusto, and I appreciate everyone's support. So that's what got you into libertarianism, and you kind of talked about what got you into running for this race. So you ran for Michigan's which district did you run in?
That was the 8th district.
So this is a House of Representatives race,
for
federal race.
U.S. Congress. Mm-hmm.
Okay, tell us specifically, like what was it that kind of drew you? You talked about obviously the principles and me inspiring you personally to do this, but what was it like? If you had gotten into that race, what would you have said are like the top 2 or 3 priorities you would have had?
Well, I guess it started where I got involved in the Michigan Libertarian Party when I moved up here. I'm from South Florida. I've been in Michigan for about 3 years now. And so the Livingston County affiliate where I live, and where Pinckney is in Livingston County, of course, and the chair of the Livingston County affiliate is a somewhat infamous libertarian named James Weeks. And he and I, disagree on quite a few issues, but I've really enjoyed, the banter and the types of conversations that we've had in our Libertarian Party affiliate meetings over the year or so before I decided to run for Congress. And in one of the meetings, I brought up, is anyone running for the 8th district seat? Not in any way intending to do it. And so James and a couple of the other people in the affiliate encouraged me to run, and they were like really nice about it. They said all these nice things about me, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to run for Congress. I don't want to be a politician. But I think part of it was that I was kind of bored from COVID, and I wanted some new adventure and activity. And for a little weird side note, I guess the year before I had gotten into community theater. I did one performance in community theater, and I had a blast. And it was something that totally outside my comfort zone. Not something that I had any experience with whatsoever. And I'm definitely more, comfortable and I enjoy talking about politics and have much more experience with that than I ever did with any, theater stuff.
Community theater stuff, right.
Yeah, just trying to get into new experiences. And so anyway, James kind of inspired me to at least consider it. And I couldn't shake the idea that I should do it. It just seemed like something that if I'm going to participate in this, if I'm going to, try to do something for these next few months to make some little impact in the world of politics, to inject my opinions and get, a platform to do that this would be a good opportunity. And so I did. I ran. I got just under 7,800, just under 7,900 votes, 1.8%, I think. So not culture of winning for that race. But I had the opportunity and, being new to this area, to make a lot of local connections. And that was really valuable and fun. And I got, I talked to lots of people in the local area, as well as lots of people within the Liberty movement. And so, it opened the door to eventually this position within the Pinckney Village Council, where, or in the Pinckney Planning Commission, where, one of the people who, I don't even know if they voted for me really, but someone who I talked to during the campaign, reached out and emailed me and encouraged me to look into this position and message the Pinckney Village president as someone that they should consider me for this if I was interested. And so, just from that connection and from, being a politician and kind of making, friendly connections and voicing my, beliefs and principles, it worked out, to lead to this opportunity. So
you state, guys, this is why I wanted to have Joe on. Joe ran for a race that when you're coming in, new and fresh like this, the odds of winning a congressional race are very low. but he came in. He was very principled. He campaigned fairly heavily in his area, which is the village of Pinckney, and as a result, he made a lot of connections there, even though he was relatively newcomer to the area. And as a result, got appointed to something where he can now make changes and make. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. Tell us a little bit about the village of Pinckney. I'm assuming for the name Village of Pinckney that this is not a major metro area. Is it? I assume this is kind of a sort of a more rural. Is it like a suburb or more of a rural area? Tell us about Pinckney.
Yeah, so Pinckney is in between Lansing and Detroit,
Okay.
and so the village of Pinckney has 2,400 residents. I looked that up just before our conversation, and so this is an area where it's on the southern side of Livingston County. And one of the interesting things that was happening on the ballot in 2020 for Pinckney was a resolution to opt in to Michigan's recreational cannabis laws to have a dispensary in Pinckney. And
Okay.
so that was one of the things that I talked about with some of the voters in the local area. And it was an area where when in 2018, Michigan passed the recreational dispensary, Pinckney had a higher percentage of support for that ballot initiative. And so this was an area targeted by activists who wanted to, get this ordinance on the ballot. And so that passed, and Pinckney will be the only place in Livingston County soon or eventually. Government licensing is still going to take a while, of course, but
Right.
but it's is an issue that I think is very straightforward according to self-ownership and property rights and the way that we think of the role of the state and the individual. And so, yeah, it was the part of my approach to campaigning, as well as an issue that I think is important for economics, for medical reasons. And
Yeah.
so to be on the planning commission and have some small input on that process of our very first meeting was about rezoning an old elementary school that had been closed because of a lower population, I believe,
Okay.
and to allow that to be turned into a grow house and dispensary. So instead of an old government building, it's now going to be used to help people.
So was that approved?
Yes, the rezoning was approved, and
Oh, wow.
I got to be a vote yes, so that was cool.
So
Yeah.
so you've been in your short period of time there, and there's been one meeting you've been to so far?
Yes.
So in your one meeting that you've been there, you've already been able to make positive changes and affecting other people's decisions and voting, obviously having your vote as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the goal. And I know there are other issues that will come up. And one of the other things that was discussed was a sidewalk waiver, where instead of like forcing a business that was trying to renovate an old building to also put in a pointless sidewalk, they allowed the waiver. And I think for the most part, I expect that most of the issues that come up will be pretty easy for me to decide. Like I won't be torn. It's just like, no, don't boss those people around with arbitrary rules. So I think for the most part, that should be pretty clear on most of the issues, that planning commissions discuss and decide. And so I hope to be able to, for one, vote for what I think is right, but also to be able to voice and influence the other members potentially to support, freedom and property owners over arbitrary regulations and red tape.
And you're doing it not as an activist on the street with a picket sign, which nothing wrong with that. You're doing it as someone who's sitting next to them saying, hey, how about this? So if you end up having a situation where there's a disagreement and where you're siding with, people's self-ownership and property rights and a majority or even a large number of other people, how big is the commission?
There's seven.
Okay, so a majority or plurality of the other people are leaning more towards having control. You're in a position to just be a normal person who is on the planning commission saying, hey, why don't we not do that to them? Why don't we let them make that choice? Is it really important for our for our village to require that they do this thing? And even if your side doesn't win on that, you're one vote closer to it winning. But even if your side doesn't win on that, you've at least helped plant those seeds with people who may end up over time moving over to your side. Because one thing I've discovered is even a lot of people, local politicians and stuff, they don't really have set philosophical beliefs on things. And if there's someone in a position, working with them who does, you can kind of move them over your way over time until one day they're going, oh crap, I'm a libertarian. So this is really good that you're doing this. Now, how would you say that you're running for Congress and the things that you did for that run? How would you say that helped kind of lead to your being appointed?
Well, the specific person that I mentioned, they heard me on a radio show, and I haggled and pestered people to try to get into the debates. My fellow candidates had 2 debates. They excluded me, unfortunately. But the radio host who hosted one of the debates offered to have me on for a 30-minute interview. And
Oh,
so,
cool.
yeah, and he was a little bit more combative than I expected with a couple of the things around lockdowns. And at one point, he was talking about, so you don't think there should be any lockdowns? And I was like, of course not. That's a violation of individual liberty. So whatever I said during that time, I got a message afterward, an email saying, that guy appreciated my, the way that I explained my approach to that. And, he made it clear that he was a Republican, but he also, appreciated what I was saying and just encouraged me to, keep at it, even if I don't win this time. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to win. I get that. But anyway, it was a nice thing. And so, I messaged him back and he wasn't in Pinckney. He was nearby. But he either had lived in, anyways, someone from the local area. And
Okay.
so he, a couple months after that exchange and communication, he had said that he found out there was this vacancy on the planning commission and said, maybe it's something you'd be interested in. And okay. And I mean, I guess I could have looked into it myself, but it wasn't really something that I find generally that I would have wanted to be involved with.
That you would have sought out. Right.
Yeah, that sitting in Robert's Rules meetings is not the most endearing. It's just not something I generally would want to participate in. But it seemed worthwhile, and like I said, I'm kind of looking for new adventures and new opportunities to develop a skill set about communicating and trying to again, make local connections and learn. It's been fascinating to read all the stuff that they have out there about zoning and all of the incredible micromanaging that the local municipalities do, and not all in bad ways, right? I think, one thing that Rothbard talks about in different, especially in American history stuff, is like local committees. And that's like actually a good form of democracy where people can have their voices heard and they can make decisions and include, a variety of stakeholders and opinions in that process. And so I think, obviously this isn't a spontaneous local committee, being the planning commission
Right.
as permanent, but there's, it's definitely an opportunity to, be a part of a deliberative process in a way that maybe would give me some more credibility if I wanted to run for something in the future, which I don't know, maybe, but yeah, if anything, it's an interesting opportunity and something to be a part of the community and connect with other people who might be libertarians.
And so, as a direct result of your remaining principled in a race that you went in saying, I'm not going to win this race, right? Like it was a federal race. And to be clear, libertarians have never won a federal race yet. We're working on that, but we haven't yet. So you went in saying, I'm just going to be principled. I'm going to go and get my name out there as much as I can. And so you were able to land this interview because they wouldn't include you in the debates. And someone heard that and went, wow, I really like that guy's principles. Even though, again, he wasn't a libertarian, he liked what you had to say, and that led to this. So, guys, this is how, when you are doing things, recognize that, yes, you want to try to win your race. You want to try to do as well as you can in your race. But even if you don't win that race, there's still potential for you to be able to win something else, and to, even if it's winning many hearts and minds in the process, and being able to parlay that into something else, like Joe's done with this, being appointed to the planning commission. So, now that you're on this, you've talked about the things that you're going to be able to accomplish now once you're in this. So, this is incredible that you're doing it. I want to ask you something. You mentioned James Weeks, and you also mentioned the Mises Caucus. In the Libertarian Party, there are many different divides, different caucuses, different ways of thinking. And the Mises Caucus and James Weeks and the Audacious Caucus, in many ways, are unfortunately polar opposites. Even though they probably agree on 85 to 95% of things, the things that they don't agree on are very contentious things. And yet you, as a, Rothbardian, Austrian economics and cap, Mises Caucus member, and James Weeks, a libertarian socialist founding member of the Audacious Caucus, have a thriving friendship and professional working relationship. Talk to me about the mutual respect and camaraderie that's required to be able to have that unity within the party, between the two of you and just within the party in general.
Yeah. So for one, in case people aren't familiar, James Weeks is the naked guy from 2016.
Yes.
So just to make sure
he's
that
the guy
that's
that
clear.
stripped down. Yeah.
That's what he's most known for. Yeah, the
dancing
around
naked guy. Yeah.
On C-SPAN. Yeah. So the thing that I enjoy, and one of my approaches to libertarianism that's different from a lot of other people, is that I like basically all libertarians. I really like most, and I think that people are interesting, and in so many ways we share common principles, right? We recognize that the state is the villain. We just have different priorities in that process of harm reduction, right? That's something I've heard you talk about very clearly, where instead of ranting about little isolated things, we want to focus on the things that are hurting people the most. And I think that the left-leaning libertarians, which James would certainly be a part of that category, are more focused on the fact that people are victimized by the state, or victimized by power and by oppressive hierarchies, of which the state is just institutional oppression and hierarchy of stagnant, just causing trouble and not allowing people to engage and pursue their interests. And so obviously I come at it in a somewhat different approach to identifying the solutions, but I think we share a lot of common principles about what the problems are. And so I have, I think, an excellent approach to the bottom unity concept and the idea of the left versus the right. And so for a long time, and I've heard lots of libertarians, kind of discount this idea of left and right. They're really not that different, or there's not like some fundamental disagreement. And I think that this kind of goes with my approach with praxeology. But I think that the Aristotle had this idea of the three methods of rhetoric, of ethos, pathos, and logos, right? And so the ethos argument is like an argument from authority. And I think the right recognizes that self-ownership is a right of authority. And so they can make arguments about property rights, and they can make arguments about markets and individualism in that way.
Authority over ourselves, right.
Yes, authority over ourselves, authority over our bodies and our property. And so that's more of the right libertarian ethos, whereas the left libertarians, and left generally, looks at things from a more emotional, from a more like need to change things, right? Like the right being conserving the good parts, versus the left wanting to change, wanting to progress, wanting to empathize with people who are struggling. And that pathos approach to things is what is absolutely necessary in politics. So to me, the way I look at it is like libertarianism has a basis, like a right wing approach to our foundational philosophy, but a left wing, or we should have a left wing approach to actual political change, because libertarians do not want to conserve the state hierarchy, right? We're not trying to protect. We want radical change. And so we need to have that left approach, but we don't want to get carried away with it and start manipulating people's emotions and only make the pathos argument, right? That is only appealing to emotion and trying to rile people's fears and all that. We need to
we want to bring them into the principles by meeting them in their emotional need.
Yes, and pointing out the fact that government programs cause victims. I think like that's the argument that Ron Paul, whether it was wars, whether it was mass incarceration, like whatever the arguments are, like the goal should be, and the Constitution is kind of a right wing thing, the protect and defend the Constitution. Whereas like Ron Paul said, the Constitution has failed. In his farewell speech to Congress, the Constitution failed to stop powerful legislators from controlling the rest of society. And so I think that's where the right wing should focus on the fact that like to build on the philosophy and not like lose those principles, but recognize that like bringing about political change has to come from a place of empathy, of telling people, or of explaining and of expressing and pointing out the failures of government. And with the Joe Jorgensen line about the government often hurts the people it's trying to help, To me, like that
Yep.
epitomizes it. That's a perfect example of making that empathetic argument. And I think we can do that across the board on any government policy. We can point to how it's hurting people. And so to me, like that's the way that our political messaging should always be pointed towards. And I am not involved in the like I don't it kind of bothers me, but I don't think it's productive. It's counterproductive when libertarians are clashing with each other and calling each other mean names or low IQ
Right.
and all that
Yep.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's just different priorities. We all want to smash the state and we all recognize the beautiful message of individual liberty. So that's
Let's
my
focus on that.
breakdown. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love how you brought in ethos, pathos, and logos into this, but really it comes down to this. If you want to reach people, you have to reach them the way that they're reachable. And if the people that you're in this together with, you agree with them on the vast majority of things and agree 100% that where we're headed is literally 180 the wrong direction, we need to make a total turn this way, I have zero interest in arguing with those folks. I have zero interest in, other than to defend myself. I have zero interest in getting into arguments with these folks, other than to say, hey, listen, why don't we put this on hold until we're at a point where we can actually effectively talk about which way is the right way to go? And there's a good chance that, as Elizabeth put it, why can't we all just get along? There's a good chance that when we get there, we go, hey, how about we all try our own different ways and figure out what works best instead of trying to force all 7.5 billion people on Earth to try to do things the exact same way. And I think that focusing on what we can do now, which is to work together on things and trying our best not to, attack each other's beliefs, or especially, it's one thing to debate over policy. It's another thing to argue that the person is a bad actor, that they're, like you said, mean names, calling them dumb, calling them low IQ, calling them bootlickers, calling them this stuff because they don't agree 100% with you is a bad place to start from. It's certainly not going to bring them over to your side. And even if it feels cathartic, it's just going to create more tension. So what's the point of that? So I'm glad that you brought that up. I want to ask you, Joe, you're a fantastic guest. I'm so happy to have you on tonight. What would you say? Someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm thinking of running for something, and what would you say is your number one bit of advice that you would give to them on once they decide that they want to run?
Well, my motivation, the phrase that I said often during the campaign, especially early on, was that I was running to have some fun and make some noise. That was my approach. And I talked to a lot of people. Anybody who was interested in talking to me. One of the cooler conversations I had was with a high school politics group that wasn't even in my district. And yet they emailed me and they were looking for candidates to come talk to them. And I got to talk to 30 students or so about libertarian. They had no idea what libertarians were for the most part, and I got a lot of faces like, what is this guy talking about? I did mellow out my message a little bit, but for the most part, I feel like and I told him to look up Ron Paul. I told him to look up a few other ideas and to watch some Joe Jorgensen. There's a third candidate running, and she's not like a weird old guy, right? Just check this out. And so just embracing the opportunities that come about is really my approach, which is the same reason I got into the race in the first place. But I had some wonderful conversations with people both within libertarian circles and outside. And the one thing that I do regret a little bit about my campaign is that I didn't work hard enough on my main issue, which is a little bit silly. It wasn't my main issue exactly, but an issue that I really wanted to raise some awareness about. And that was ending clock changing. So
ending daylight savings time.
Ending. Well, we don't necessarily want to end daylight savings time, but we just want to end the chaos of clock changing. That was my thing. And 15 states now have made progress about either going to permanent standard time or permanent daylight time. But there's actually a federal law that prohibits states, even though state legislatures have passed bills to say we want to be on permanent daylight savings time. The federal government forces them to change their clocks. Florida is one of those states because that's where I'm from. And so I know.
How did Arizona get through? Are they grandfathered in?
That's what everyone says. No, Arizona is on permanent standard time. That's legal. Permanent daylight savings time, illegal. So stupid. And it's unbelievable. And you know, like whatever, it's a bit of a petty issue, but there are estimates that 28 additional people die every year from car accidents. There are other like disruptions in circadian rhythms, and there's an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Australian study that talked about additional suicides, that it messes with people, and it's so unnecessary. And it's like such a typical example of like back in the day they were like fearful about using electricity, so let's do this thing with moving clocks, and then it became like a chamber of commerce lobbying to do it, and to have
Yeah.
more business in the evenings. And so anyway, it's just one of those
And
things
now
that
people
is
die as a
so
result
dumb.
of it.
28 people per year, and we're coming up towards March.
Wow.
And I got a little bit tired of talking about it because I was repeating myself so often. I had to mention it today on your show, because it is something that I'm passionate about for whatever it is, as an example of, it's like a perfect example of like arbitrary government garbage just like ruining our day. And like they call it daylight savings, it's daylight tax day. That's what it is. They take the hour away from us. They don't save any daylight. And so anyway, it's just an issue that I tried to raise some awareness about. I got very little attention. I messaged lots of Congress people. I tried to get more. There were 21 co-sponsors on the bill called the Daylight Act for the last Congress. But that guy who wrote it from Utah is another one of the states that has, that, like I said, 15 states have either tried to pass a resolution, or they have passed a resolution. They've passed actual legislation that the federal government is prohibiting them. Like in terms of decentralization, it's a great message for that as well. And like I said, the 28 additional, that's car accidents, and you can like
Yeah.
the data over. I think it was like a 30-year study where they could show that like that week, the week
Due to that,
following,
yeah.
when everyone loses an hour and it throws us off, and it messes with nocturnal animals. So anyway, it's not the biggest priority out there, but I thought it would be fitting for someone who's not really going to win the race that I could raise some awareness about it. There's a great website. It's sco.tt. The guy's name is Scott Yates. He's been an activist on this issue for many years. He's not a libertarian at all, but he tracks all of the bills. At one point last year, there were 46 states had bills active at the state level to do something about this stupid problem. So anyway, that's my pet issue.
So I want to get back to that, because I think if
Yes,
you would,
yes.
I think a congressional candidate who ran primarily on ending daylight savings time, or at least allowing states to switch to one or the other permanently, or switch to
Yes.
daylight savings permanently, or whatever. You probably, if you say, end the hour tax or whatever, people hate that so much, you might come in second or get like double digits. Like you may, like, just because everyone hates that universe, and that's like a bipartisan thing. I don't think I've ever met a
Yes.
single person that's like, yeah, I think that's a great idea for us to not know what time it is tomorrow. Like, I've never met anyone. And I think that you potentially could do very well. So your advice to candidates, besides adopt
Oh,
the
yes.
anti-daylight savings
Yeah.
messaging, which I co-sign, is be open to what happens. Be open to opportunities. You don't have to take all of them. And I'm certainly an example of this. When someone comes to you and says, "Hey, why don't you try this?" Be open to the idea of it. You don't have to take it, but look through it, because it might end up making sense. It's why Joe ended up running for Congress, and it's ultimately why he now is in an actual position in his village government, where he potentially could be the difference between a business being able to take off or not. Like what would just happen with the cannabis business that was the school because of rezoning, or someone not being burdened with some kind of ridiculous zoning restriction or something like that because of the position he's in. And like he said, he also, and you can, if you're get put in a similar position, you can potentially end up winning future races. You could end up, now that you are no longer just, I was going to say Joe Schmo, but Joe Schmartman. Now that you're no longer just someone who's lived here for a few years and decided to run for. Now you're someone who someone can point at and go, yeah, no, he did a good job with that. She did a good job with that. You can now potentially win. So that's awesome, man. So hey, listen, before I let you go, you were a fantastic guest. Thanks so much for coming on. Before I let you go, I want to give you a chance to have the final say. Say whatever it is you thought you wanted to say. Promote anything that you want to promote. Anything you want to talk about. You have as much time as you want. Joe Hartman, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to add a little gratitude. I reached out to people within LP National. for any like advice about how to be on a planning commission. And I, got some emails forwarded and just got a lot of encouragement, a lot of insight from other people within the Libertarian Party who had served on city council in Minnesota, another person I think from Arkansas, but just like talk about their experiences and the value of having the network of the Libertarian Party. And one of my bigger goals was to just try to be a part of the Libertarian Party brand, to offer my message and my approach to philosophy and reducing the violence of politics in our society. And
Right.
so it worked out with this planning commission thing, and we'll see how that goes. And I look forward to continuing to be a big part of the Libertarian Party of Michigan, and with all my friends in the Mises Caucus focusing on local issues. This seemed like a great way to be a part of localizing decision making. And so like I said before, Spike, I really appreciate you as a just a role model and a voice for reasonable, principled libertarian ideas. There are more and more people within the Libertarian Party that I find more and more impressive, and it's exciting. I think it's a great time to be a part of the Libertarian Party. We have so many opportunities to continue to grow and thrive, and so I'm excited, and this was a lot of fun. And also, if you don't like changing clocks, like, do something about it. Talk to your congresspeople or whatever.
Yeah.
15 states. Washington is another state. Anyway, so that's my last little sign off there.
No, I agree. I think this show from now on is going to be Spike Cohen's No More Changing Clocks. And we're going to completely change the format.
Yeah, in a few months, you're going to be so tired. Monday at 8 o'clock, it's going to feel like Monday at 9 o'clock. You're going to be all drowsy, unless we could do something about it. And I did see that they call it the Daylight Protection Act is a new thing in Congress again, but that forces everyone to go to daylight savings time. So I don't like that one as much, right? All the states have to do that. Let the states choose.
Let the states choose.
Exactly. Yeah. So
now I would take just a permanent daylight savings over
Sure.
The continued switch over, but let's just let the states choose. I like the one where it's still light out at night. I always forget which is which. Is that daylight savings?
That's the daylight savings. Yes.
Okay,
in Michigan, and in Michigan, the bill that was at the state level was to go to permanent standard time. And because we're on the west side of the time zone, it really made more sense.
Oh, okay. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
But in some states have multiple bills. They have that Bill Track 50, which is a great resource to look up bills at the state level. So anyway, it's my little pet thing, but it's one of those things. My optimistic view is that people will look back on our era and just be like, oh my God, these people used to change their clocks back and forth. They didn't even know, like, that's not how time works. You can't
just barbarians
back and forth. Anyway, so it's someday this will be a horribly antiquated idea. And I hope that maybe just my insistence on bringing this up whenever I have an opportunity and a platform to do that. So thanks, Spike.
I'm glad I could help. We want an era where the grandchild's looking up and saying, Grandpa, what was it like when you had to change clocks? And they start, the Vietnam music starts coming on and everything. They start having the flashbacks. That's funny, man. Well, listen, hey, congratulations on your appointment and on everything you're doing in Michigan. I believe I should be at your convention, but we're still working on that. So I hope to get to meet you in person if you're going to be there. In fact, Connor says, hey, Joe. But yeah, hey, thanks so much for coming on. And I'm just really excited about what you're doing. And like you said, we are fighting for a world set free in our time. And I agree with you. I believe that our time is now. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thanks, Mike.
And thank you guys for watching this episode, this 16th episode. We're 16 episodes in of Spike Cohen's Culture of Winning. Join me next week. I got the calendar pulled up and everything. Next week, I will be interviewing Paul Robbins Jr. out of Alaska, and we will be talking about his race that he won. And have a great week. Join me tomorrow on Muddy Waters Media at 8 p.m. for the Muddy Waters of Freedom. Join me Wednesday, I believe at 8, but there may be a special interview that may push that back. But probably at 8 on Wednesday night for My Fellow Americans. And then I will join you right back here next Monday at 8 p.m. Same Spike place, same Spike time for Spike Cohen's Culture Winning. Guys, thanks again for joining us again. I'm Spike Cohen, and you are the power. Take care, guys.